Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today, and welcome to the fifth Healthy Relationship Conversation. My name is Neba Ikram. I am one of the co-founders of Pillars of Peace. Pillars of Peace is a nonprofit organization aimed at addressing domestic violence in the Muslim community. We have continuous program throughout the year, and we address issues such as domestic violence, gender-based violence, red flags to look out for, and we provide various resources and ongoing Know Your Rights workshops. You can get all of those on our social media pages, on our Instagram and our Facebook page. In this particular series, we talk about healthy dynamics. We've previously spoken about incredibly important topics like communication, boundaries, consent, attachment styles, and then terminology such as ghosting and benching. And today we're going to focus a little bit on building a relationship with ourselves. And we want to do this today in the context of Ramadan, and also in the fast-paced environment that we're living in. It feels really important to talk about developing a meaningful relationship with oneself. And I would love for us in this conversation to keep in context the worker pillars of peace, and generally individuals who have experienced trauma in their life, keeping in mind COVID and the impacts of that as well. And of course, Ramadan. So I'm really excited to invite both of our panelists, Sheikh Faiyaz Jaffer, Associate Chaplain at NYU, board members of Pillars of Peace, and also PhD candidate. We are going to be joined another 10 minutes or so by Dr. Hala Alyan, who is a poet and author and a clinical psychologist. Both of them are very, very esteemed guests of ours and very, very knowledgeable. So without further ado, I would like to invite Sheikh Faiyaz Jaffer, and I believe Dr. Hala Alyan will be joining us in a couple minutes.
How are you, Neba? Thank you for having us
again. Oh, thank you for being here. Ramadan Mubarak. Ramadan Kareem. How are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. Can't complain. Excited. Part 5. Been doing these for the last couple of weeks and the last couple of months, and so inshallah we look forward to hopefully continuing these conversations moving forward.
Inshallah. So Hala is going to be joining us inshallah in another couple minutes. So I thought we could possibly get started.
Sure.
Yeah, so I was just kind of wondering about the importance of caring for oneself, especially in the month of Ramadan, and how Ramadan can be a time of reflection and healing for the soul. So if you could talk about that a little bit, just to kind of get us grounded and situated in the topic.
Yeah, no, for sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think that when we talk about oneself, the term self is very present within Islamic literature, be it in the Quran or be it in the prophetic traditions, the ahadith literature. And I think it's really important to understand that the self that is often spoken about within Islamic scripture is in regards to what is known as the human soul, or an-nafs. Nafs is also what we would consider in the Arabic language as the self, but nafs is also a term given to the soul. And I think that's really, really important to understand as kind of like a foundational principle and where to start and where to build from. So when we talk about, the human being, we talk about the human being as comprised of, different dimensions. And I say this fairly often. Amongst those dimensions that we're comprised of course, the human body. The body is the most obvious of them all. It's the physical. It's that which we see. It's the, body that, I can utilize these 5 senses of mine that I've been gifted with. I have, for instance, 60 or 70 years or 80 years, to live in this dunya, but I'm also limited. I'm limited by time, right? Obviously, in terms of the amount of years I'm going to live. I'm limited by space. I would love to be, 5'11", right? Or 6 feet tall. But unfortunately, I'm never going to grow more than this 5'7" body of mine, right? Unfortunately, I am limited and I am bound by certain things. I wish I was over here, meaning in New York City, but also in, I don't know, Long Island, having iftar with my parents, for instance, today, right? Or in Medina, next to the grave of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But unfortunately, I'm restricted, I'm bounded, right? So the human being is a limited creation through their physical body in this corporeal physical existence of ours. What is unique, though, about the human being as well is that in addition to us being a body, we're also a soul, a nafs, that God has given us the spiritual capacity, which is not restricted by any of these things, but in and of itself is also not material, meaning it's immaterial. And I say all of this as an introduction to kind of understanding this dynamic then, to understanding that the human being is a physical, is a spiritual, but the spiritual is the reality, the real you. I give this example, maybe to sort of clarify and break it down a little bit further. If I were to, I don't know, if I were to forget my phone one day when I'm going to work, okay? You forget your phone and you tell yourself and you tell others that it's as if that I forgot a part of myself at home, right? Because of how we are so inclined to our phones. But did you really forget about it? Do you really forget a part of yourself at home? Did you really forget, like, did you forget a part of Naba at home if you forgot your phone when you're going to work? No, you're still yourself. You're still your full present self. You're still physically bringing your whole self to your job or to your, friend's home or to dinner or wherever it is else that you're going. You are still that same human being. More than that, I think what we want to understand is that, if God forbid I was to lose a limb, right? I was to lose a finger. I was to lose God forbid something had to get amputated from my body. Physically, I am still Faiyaz Jafar. Whether I or not, I still have the same body or not, my body changes or whatever, I'm still essentially the same human being that I am. And I say all of this again to sort of demonstrate that the I that we speak of, when I say I am speaking right now, or when I say you, when we say, me, all of these terminologies are not in reference to the physical body, but rather they're in reference to the human soul or the spiritual capacity that God has given us. So we want to understand again that we are this physical and that we are this spiritual, this physical and this spiritual. Looks like we lost Naba, and it looks like Dr. Hala is having some trouble joining. So let me just pause over here for just one moment so we can get them online. We apologize for the delay.
I'm back.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Hala is just coming on.
Yeah, no worries. But I think, I think the question that you asked, that was really important, right? Going back to this idea and this notion then that we have this spiritual capacity as well. So when we talk about, just also while we're waiting for Dr. Hala, since I have some extra time to speak, and when you give a sheikh microphone, they like to talk a lot. That when we want to talk about caring for oneself during the month of Ramadan, we're talking about caring for the soul prior to caring for the body. And it's not a bad thing to care for the body. You should eat healthy, you should exercise, you should do all of these things. And that's really, really important. And that helps support the soul's cultivation and development. But through a caring of the soul, we're not bound by the materialistic physical aspects, that we find present in this corporeal dunya and existence. So many a time, for instance, we feel an attachment to food, an attachment to drink, an attachment to sex, an attachment to sleep, an attachment to wealth, whatever it might be. But all of those things are, materialistic things that are bounded, also by time and by space, meaning that they're also transient, right? With the soul, when you find a sense of contentment internally, when you're comfortable with who you are, when you're comfortable with, the moment that you're in, when you feel a sense of contentment that is transient is the first moment that you take a bite of pecan pie, right? For me at least, right? Because I love pecan pie and I'm really hungry right now, But that moment is so passing, because the minute that the pecan pie finishes or that slice finishes, then I no longer feel that sense of contentment. But we're looking for something beyond that. So caring for the self is thinking beyond what can physically offer me a little bit of pleasure in the meantime, but really find a sense of depth and true sort of understanding of what it is that this heart of mine, that this soul of mine is seeking.
Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. And thank you for grounding us sort of in the religious context of caring for ourselves, and especially in the month of Ramadan. So I really appreciate your reflections. Hala, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So we just started off asking Sheikh Faiyaz a little bit about the importance of caring for oneself in religious context. And I'm really curious to hear from you as well. I kind of spoke in the beginning about how we're kind of grounding ourselves in the work of Pillars of Peace. Also, keeping in mind people have experienced various types of trauma, and just kind of experiencing living in a pandemic as well. And then I would love to hear from you a little bit about this common phrase I hear from people: I'm doing the work, right? Curious, what work? I hear people doing the work. I'm like, what work am I supposed to be doing? So how do we build that emotional intimacy with ourselves?
So I think doing the work has become, it's a little bit like the instification of like wellness. Like it's a kind of like a phrase that doesn't really mean anything anymore. But I think it's important to reclaim it. I think that doing the work means doing the things, small and big, on a day-to-day basis that bring you closer to yourself and to your purpose. And I think when I think about that within the context of Ramadan, it also brings, like, what it brings up for me also is like doing things that also bring you closer to Allah, doing things that bring you closer to doing good things, to charity, to being good to the people around you, to being vulnerable, to demonstrating and modeling that vulnerability to others. I think that it has to do with going into the parts of the self that are painful and wounded. You mentioned traumas, like maybe traumatized, maybe sorry, my dog is just like, I don't know what, just like freaking out in the background. But basically going into the parts of ourselves that are shadowy and unfinished and maybe like hurt a fair amount, and to be unflinching and being committed to healing I think that there's a way in which we talk about healing in the West, and I think this has actually been like my field has been a culprit in this, because psychotherapy is very much a white Western social science that was created for a certain subgroup of people, that really bases a lot of the work around individual growth, individual healing, individualism in general, so that the end result becomes the individual becomes better, right? The individual heals, the individual's symptomology disappears, whatever. Whereas I really think like doing the work in the way that I conceptualize it means healing as a community, and means healing within your community, within your tribe, within your family, within whatever groups you belong to. This idea that like without everybody rising, nobody can rise. And I think that actually feels truer when I think about healing. Like it feels truer to actually what healing means than this idea of like each person is on their own doing these kind of interior excavations and calling it a day. So yeah, those are some of the things that come up. I don't know if nobody left. What else? I can keep going. What else is doing the work? Oh, there you are.
Sorry, I was just changing spots. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I think it's really important to take that time to kind of reflect, especially healing those sometimes often wounded or hurt spots, taking the time to do that. And also recognizing that, individual one-on-one therapy may not be for everyone, or may be, and, seek that spiritual or other kind of space, maybe, more like community-based groups as well?
Well, and to be fair, I still think individual one-on-one therapy is incredibly useful, and I think everybody should do it. But meaning that, like, we can then conceptualize. You can, even within one-on-one therapy, be conceptualizing healing as something that exists within groups and communities. We are pack animals at the end of the day in a lot of ways, right? We're not meant to live in isolation or live in vacuums, and so I think just the same way that our joy happens together, our grief happens together, our healing happens together too.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That's really helpful. Um, and when people are looking for a therapist, what's a good way of looking for one?
It's a great, I'm going to put it in the chat. Is there a way to do it so that everyone can see? Yes. Okay. So I'm going to put psychologytoday.com, and you can go in there and put in your zip code, and you can filter it by gender, by insurance, by language, by religion. So you can filter it in a number of different ways. I think that's a really useful way to look for folks. And I also I think that finding a good therapist can sometimes take a while, and it's goodness of fit, and it's not that dissimilar to like finding a good partner, where it's like it's okay if you don't match with the first person that you connect with, or it doesn't feel like the best fit in the world. So just kind of keep at it. I will also, the other thing I would add to that, because I do think this is important, because New York, like, it's very saturated in terms of therapy. But sometimes folks, because there's only like, a handful of people that like come from a particular background, or a handful of people that speak a specific language, because almost everybody in this country at this point that's a therapist is doing remote work, you can also look elsewhere. You can you can expand the search a little bit.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful, especially I think often people within the field, it's even harder sometimes to find people. So I think it's useful to know that you can kind of tap into other states.
Totally. Yeah.
So I have another question, just thinking a little bit about feeling one is not enough, or suffering from a bit of a imposter syndrome, and often, self-esteem being impacted by various types of trauma, whether that's like an abusive relationship or, other sorts of trauma. And then there's day to day, we're just so busy, right? So you just don't have time to pause and think about that. So what is a good way of addressing those things we might be experiencing? So Hala, maybe you can start, and Sheikh Faiyaz, if you want to chime in as well.
I think that, I say this every time, like I find a way to plug in like meditation, but I think for me, it's like meditation, prayer, moments of stillness, like being able to be outside in nature alone, even for a few minutes every day. Like, I think whatever time you can take to contemplate, to reflect, to be with yourself, to be with God, like depending on like whatever it is that you need to reach, whatever ways you find stillness. And I think that really varies for people. Try to build those into your schedule as much as you can. Because I think that it's really hard to take our emotional temperature when we're not taking a beat to like pause and actually ask ourselves how we're feeling and how we're doing and what it is that we're struggling with in a particular moment. So I think there's a way in which like building into your day-to-day life times where you just like take a minute and just like literally like, how am I feeling? How am I doing? How's my heart doing today? How's my body doing today? I think that can go a really long way. You might not always like the answer. I think a lot of times, we're sort of, a lot of people are like anesthetized with like social media and like whatever like mildly bad habits that people gather, because the truth is that the answer is often complicated, right? Like a lot of times, especially you mentioned people with trauma or people who are going through difficult times. Like, I think that there can be sort of a flinching away from the question of like, how am I doing? How am I feeling? Because it's like, I don't really want to have to sit there, but I think that catches up with you one way or another. And so it's really, I think it's really beautiful to be sort of willing to sit with the self on a regular basis and touch base. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I love that. Sheikh Faiyaz, do you want to add something?
Yeah, for sure. I think it goes back to the initial question that you had asked as well, that, where do you find a sense of solace and peace and contentment, you know,
Mhm.
and doing that which brings that forth and really manifests it for the individual is really, really important. And I think for a lot of people, when they think again about, you know, terms like that, which brings peace and contentment, again, they're often linked to externals as opposed to internals. So I will feel better if I get married. I will feel better if I have children. I will feel better if I get this job. I will feel better if I lose weight. I will feel better if I eat this food. I will feel better if I'm in this person's company. And you know, what you realize is that, you know, we're not fashioned to find ultimate satisfaction in externals. Again, I'm not saying that those things are bad goals to set. That's good, right? That's wonderful. And they may offer you, and they're meant to offer you, a temporary solace, right? Which is why these things are encouraged. We're not encouraged to fast 365 days of the year, you know, right? Food offers us a sense of sustenance, right? God does not want us to worship in a mountain and, you know, sort of disconnect from community, and, you know, not to be around people, not socialize. No, quite the contrary. It's about feeling God's presence, but even amongst people, you know? So I think that, you know, reflecting internally, which is why, you know, the famous verse of the Quran states, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub," that by the remembrance of God do these hearts find a sense of peace and contentment, right? So through that prayer, through that worship, through that meditation, through that reflection, through going out for that walk and actively thinking during it, right? And like, I think, you know, Hala, what you mentioned is you're not always happy or satisfied with kind of the answers when you're with yourself. It's easier to kind of take our problems and shove them under the rug as opposed to sort of bringing them to the forefront, you know? It's uncomfortable. But through that moment of uncomfortability, there's that much more opportunity to sort of cultivate some sense of comfort after that, you know? And, you know, it really requires that sense of like really focus, real focus, real diligence, in regards to, you know, being with ourselves and then communicating, right? Within the Islamic context, communicating with God, which is something as simple as, you know, not as simple as, but as something as established as supplication, right? Dua, making dua to God, but not regurgitating a supplication that you heard someone else read or that you've been reading for such a long time, whereby you're just saying it with the tongue, right? We're talking about speaking with the heart, right? Again, not attached to externals, but internals, which is why, you know, the abundance of traditions that we have on sincerity. Look, I can pray all the prayers in the world. I can stand and bow and prostrate and stand and bow and prostrate and stand and bow and prostrate and just do it ritualistically. But if the prayer is not sort of transforming me internally, well, then the prayer is just a ritual, right? Which consists of standing and bowing and prostrating, right? Which is good for you, right? That's like not what we want to be, though. We want to be someone who utilizes the prayer as a mechanism for, you know, spiritual success, you know? So it's going beyond the ritual and cultivating that sense of spiritual. And in this context, it's really sort of diving deep in and finding that sense of contentment and solaceness and peace by not focusing on the externals, right? Go ahead and make money. But if you think that money is going to make you ultimately happy, that's just not the truth. You can take a look at a million examples in history and a million examples in the future who won't find success in that. Good, do it and utilize it as a means for your temporal success. But know that ultimate contentment does not lie in these physical, tangible, again, externals.
And it's like all you will do is, and it's so accurate and it's so beautifully said, it's like the thinking that it's outside is really destination thinking, meaning like you're always waiting to arrive at a destination. Like happiness is a place you're going to arrive at, success is a place you're going to arrive at, and it's like that is just not how the world works. And I think that's a truth people, it's a hard one. It's a hard one to sit with. And it also really runs counter to a lot of things that we're taught in our culture, within capitalism, within modern society. But it's really not something you arrive at. It's something that you cultivate and you learn to fall in love with the process and the journey. And I think that has a lot to do with exactly what you're saying. You could do the supplication 30 times, 40 times, 50 times a day, but it's like, if there's no meaning or intention, like true intention, I think is like it's the real gas behind any machine that's worth driving in this life. It's like being able to actually set good intentions.
Yeah, because you take a look at the world that we live in, right? It's all about accumulation, right?
Exactly.
Accumulating more and more and more and more, right? You got this good job, you're making good money. Like, because what's your next step? Like, how are you gonna make more money, right?
Right,
It's
right,
like, you eat this food now. How can I eat better food, right?
Exactly.
And again, all of these things are good and they're fine, right? But culture, our community, society, it's driving home something completely different. Great, you got an Instagram page, you have 15 friends. Why don't you have 1,500? Then why don't you have 15,000? Why don't you have 150,000? Right? It's all.
It'll never be enough. It'll
never
never
be enough. Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow, that's super profound. That left me super moved. I'm just thinking about the journey rather than the destination. So thank you both. And that kind of perfect segue into my next question, which is, how do we allow ourselves to experience joy? Often we start feeling guilt. There's a lot going on in the world as well, or like other factors. We'll feel shame, or we'll just end up self-sabotaging a situation. So I'd love if you could share a little bit about that as well.
I think for me, how do you allow yourself to experience joy? It's similar to how do you do anything in this life. It's like you do it mindfully, you do it with intention, you do a little bit every day. One of the things that I've been doing for Ramadan, I have this like nightly ritual. Actually, I listened to Sheikh Faiyaz's amazing podcast. It's been incredibly grounding and incredibly beautiful. And I also had like put out a call. This is, you know what, I'm gonna tie it into something you were saying where you're talking about like, you can have the followers, you can have the money, you can have like, great, awesome, what are you doing with it? And because I was just talking about this with someone lately, where one of the things that I did at the beginning of Ramadan was I put out this little call to the people that are on my Instagram. And I was just like, send me the most life-affirming, moving, transformative, spiritual, profound things that you can. Anybody wants to send me anything, send it to me. I'm trying to do something every day on Ramadan that is just like getting in touch with something that's moved somebody. It's been one of the things that I've been doing, right? And I've gotten this, like, I now have plenty to last me maybe actually for the rest of the year if I want to do something every day. It's been like such an abundance. So that's an example of like, okay, you have followers on Instagram. How are you using that? How are you connecting with people? What are you doing that actually like brings value? And my hope is to gather these resources and share them at some point. But so what I've been doing for this month is every night I listen to the podcast. Sometimes I take a bath, sometimes I take a walk, sometimes I whatever. And then it will engage with, I'll just sort of randomly scroll through the things that have been sent to me and close my eyes and pick one randomly and just like listen. And so sometimes it's a talk, sometimes it's a dance recital, sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it's a TED talk or a poem or whatever, and just really kind of sit with and meditate on the things that I've taken in that day. And so it's really, you know what? Nothing stopped me from doing this ritual 3 weeks ago. Nothing stopping me from doing it in 3 weeks. It's just, I did not, what happened was Ramadan started and I said that I really wanted to set some sort of practice in addition to like reading Quran and all these other things. I like wanted to set something that was like intentional and allowed me to cultivate a little bit of like inspiration and joy every day. That's it. I have no more or no less time than I did a month ago. It's really just that I made space for it. And I think that there's something to be said for making space for joy and making space for inspiration. That even if you can spare a few minutes a day, like if you can use those few moments intentionally, I think it can make all the difference in the world. I really do.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Sheikh Faiyaz.
Thank you for listening. I'm so humbled. Oh my goodness.
Oh my God, I love it.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. So I would say two things that were mentioned previously by Hala as well, and that's intentionality, number one, and then I would couple that with accountability, right? So intentionality means to like really have that firm commitment to going out and doing what it is that you got to do. So in the beginning of the month of Ramadan, we're setting out an intention that at the end of this month, I am going to improve myself, right? But you have to not say it in sort of, very, large, ambiguous ways, but say, how am I going to improve myself in very tangible, practical ways? And now look, if you are not there yet and you just set that long, ambiguous goal, then we have 20 days left, right? Nothing's lost. We're just starting, And so take a look at it as a new opportunity. So I would say, what are those things that individually I need to work on, right? Because we're talking about finding joy and finding sense of, peace or whatever it might be, is that, it's going back and reflecting, what are my flaws, right? So that's where like accountability comes and sets in. And I mean, like, look, if does somebody get angry too quickly? Do they lose their focus? Are they unorganized? Are they not forgiving? I don't know, right? Everyone, do they have racial tendencies? Everyone has a different thing or a lot of things that we need to work on. There's always room to improve, naturally, right? There's always room to improve. So let's just take something easy and simple, like anger, for instance. Let's just say that, someone is an angry person. How long is it going to take before they cure this disease of anger, like within these hearts of theirs, within the souls of theirs? So the beginning of the month of Ramadan comes and you make this commitment that in addition to reciting Quran, in addition to, performing my prayers, in addition to fasting, if you have the ability to do so, I am going to commit toward, eradicating anger from this heart. Or, I don't know, just for lack of a better example. Now, what are the steps that you need to take? You have to figure that out. That's kind of the self-reflection, part of it. What are the things that make you angry? Is it the fact that you get hungry very often, or you get hungry all the time, which is why you take that out on other people? And during the month of Ramadan, this issue gets even more complicated. I don't know, right? Or you make an intention to read a certain amount of books, right? I have an intention that during the month of Ramadan, I need to finish X and Y and Z, like a couple of really important books that have kind of been sitting on my nightstand for a long time, and they're all books on religion. And I made this intention that I have to complete every single one of them by the end of the month. Now, the only person who can hold themselves accountable, because there's no external factors, is yourself. So putting yourself through the test and really being hard on yourself, but not to the extent where you begin to beat yourself up and self-deprecate. Finding that balance between accountability and sort of this deprecation is really, really important. And kind of sitting back with that intention, I'm going to do X and Y and Z. And when you do something good, you feel like, you feel a sense of joy and a sense of sort of accomplishment. And you have to celebrate those victories as well. So I'm not sure if this was actually clear. Now that I said it, I realized that it might have not sounded as eloquent as I was hoping for it to sound.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Also, there's something that you said at the beginning that I like really want to just amplify for people, and it's something that you said in one of the nightly reflections, which is that like you can always start. Like it's never like you can start again, just begin again. Like, you know what I mean? Like you said it much better than that. But essentially, like, if people are like, oh, I've already done this thing, or I've already messed up that thing, or I was hoping to do this every day and I didn't, and like, I lost my temper at this person or whatever. It's like, that's the like beautiful thing about being alive, is that every minute is a new minute and every second is a new second. And look, sometimes the next minute is harder than the one before, but like things are like temporary and they pass and they're transient. And there is nestled within every minute that we're alive and we have breath is some degree of agency and some degree of choice, and if you can make a 10% better choice today than you made yesterday, amazing. Like that's room to succeed. And there's always that reset button. And that reset button doesn't have to be like at sunrise when you wake up or whatever. It can be like at 4 p.m. I mean, you can literally reset at any time. And I think that's really like such a profound and important thing for people to remember, because I think we get really bogged down too in this idea that even in our healing, or even in our spiritual journey, or even in our whatever, we can get really rigid that it has to look a certain way. I committed to doing a month of this thing and I miss one day and it's like, then I'm like, so many people will just sort of like burn the rest of the month because they messed up once, as opposed to being like, it's okay, like fail, but fail better. And just kind of being committed to failing better, I think, is its own like success.
Like you're exactly right. Like, the spiritual ups and downs that we go through during the course of our lives. Look, at the end of the month of Ramadan, we want to hopefully become a better person than we were on the first of Ramadan, right? But that is going to be difficult to sustain over an extendedly long period, meaning we're going to slip and we're going to fall, right? So I remember talking to someone last year, for instance. They said that during the month of Ramadan, I committed last year to reciting 1 juz of the Quran and completing the entirety during the month. I said, great. And they said, we did it. I said, okay, great. And they said, after that, I didn't open up the Quran for months. Right. I was like, well, what was the point then? What was the point then, right? The idea is that you're not setting up these lofty goals that are going to be difficult to sustain thereafter, but rather you're taking the small steps toward building to something kind of in the long, taking the long approach toward things, right? You want that change, you want that sort of reformation of heart, reformation of soul to take place, but realize that, like any other, goal that you set in mind, you can't attain it in 30 days. It takes time. And again, doesn't mean you can't change your life during these 30 days. You absolutely can. But, if you do slip up, you just get back up, and you just keep on going.
Exactly. I mean, name me anything worth having that has a strictly linear progression, where every single thing is one step above the other one. Like, name me anything worth having that does that. It's not how it works. It's really not how it works. And I think the sooner we can make space for this idea that, like, you're gonna fail, you're gonna slip up, and it's okay, and just keep trying to do better and better and better, that I think so much suffering is lessened by just accepting that that's part of the process.
I love, two things that I'm taking is one, committing to feeling better, and then two, growth. I think that just continuous work in progress. So I guess stemming from this, another question I have is, how can we practice self-forgiveness and compassion, right? So we're committing to doing better, feeling better, or, internal work, growth. But how do we, if we're kind of holding on to some things, begrudging ourselves, how do we practice that self-forgiveness and compassion?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. There's a really, really important balance that I believe a human being needs to make between, again, accountability, holding oneself to account, but and really beating yourself up for when you slip and when you fall. We are always more difficult on ourselves than we are on others. Always. That's just the nature of the human being. What I don't want to sort of direct, or what I don't want to sort of display, is that when you do slip, it's okay to be hard on yourself, to making sure that you get back up and commit back to the right course. So I'll give you an example. We don't want to embrace this model of ultimate self-forgiveness, right? Whereby we just keep on giving ourselves excuses why we should be bad to other people, So if someone has a bad character trait where they're always treating others harshly, and then you go back home and you realize, oh man, I had a really bad day and I treated everyone around me really poorly, but let me just forgive myself, right? And just move on. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about someone who extends, their doctor tells them you need to cut out sugar, and then for 5 or 7 years, you just consistently eat sugar every day, saying that tomorrow I'm going to start and tomorrow I'm going to commit to it. Let me just be kinder and nicer to myself. Once in a while, you need to wake yourself up, shake yourself up, right? In Islamic ethics, they literally call it the waking up, right? You need to wake up your soul. What are some of the things you can do? You go to a graveyard, you remember your mortality, not to sound cryptic, right? But it's something that wakes you up a little bit. You remember you're not living for this. We're not a physical, but we're also a spiritual, by going out and, that money that you were so careful over, you give some of it in charity, right? Because it sort of wakes you up and realize, well, this is not even mine. This is all temporary, And so these are some practices that we can engage in. So, but at the same time, you also don't want to sort of, kind of just be so frustrated with yourself that you're not going to be able to get out of, that rut that you're in. So going back to the example that, you made a commitment that you're going to cut down your sugar, but then somebody brought you a pecan pie, right? And then you ate it, and then after you felt really, really bad. So you could kind of do one or two things. You could forgive yourself and say, well, I'm not going to only eat the slice, but I'm going to eat the whole thing, right? Or you could be like, you know what? Just one slice. It's not a big deal. Let me just get right back up, and I'm going to, commit the rest of my day, not starting tomorrow, today, at this moment, I'm going to commit the rest of my day to going back to my healthy eating habits, right? For instance, similarly, when it comes to, spirituality, someone makes that commitment. I'm going to recite the entire Quran during the month of Ramadan, right? Or I'm going to recite one chapter of the Quran. Or I'm going to recite 5 minutes of the Quran every single day, okay? And then one day, they just don't do it. They don't feel well, they're not motivated, they're not inspired, for whatever reason, you don't do it, the next day you can't say, well, screw this, I give up, I'm not doing this anymore. No, right? You have to find that balance. But if that, one day becomes 3 days, and it becomes 5 days, and it becomes a week, and it becomes a month, and it becomes a year, well, then you have to, again, sort of allow for that waking up process to take place. Shake your soul up a little bit so you feel that sense of inspiration.
Sheikh Faiyaz, you have something to tell us about the pecan pie?
I was just gonna say,
Oh,
do you
God,
want me to send you one?
I could,
for a thought one of these days?
honestly, if you don't mind, I would appreciate it. Yeah, I could use a slice of pecan pie right now.
I think that's really profound. I love that idea of waking up, and I love that idea too of like you take your money, you give it. I mean, you just like remind yourself this is all on loan, right? All of this is on loan at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I agree with all of that. And I would just add that I think perfection is really the enemy of progress. Like that quote is so accurate. Like it really, the idea of being perfectionistic and rigid about progress and about change and whatnot is going to be the thing that almost ensures failure at the end of the day. Like if you can get, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about this idea of failing, but failing better. It's like if you can allow for the fact that there are going to be fluctuations in your progress, but that you are ultimately, like if at the end of every day, you can look yourself in the mirror or you put your hand over your heart and say, you know what? I did what I needed to do and what was within my capacity today to work towards that ultimate goal, whatever, and fill in the blank, whatever the ultimate goal is for you. Then I think you're good. And I think that like that idea of like the pecan pie, you take a bite and then you eat the whole pie. I think actually that has a lot to do with perfection, because there's the idea that I said it's very binary. I said I was going to have no sugar, and then I had a little bit of sugar, so I might as well have all the sugar in the world, and it's like, okay, or you had a little bit of sugar, just like brush it off, like, you know what I mean? Like, no, okay, get up, like, it's okay. You don't have to have any more, move on. I think that all or nothing thinking is really the thing that ends up getting in the way of progress. I think forgiveness of the self is like forgiveness of anything else. I think we do it when the alternative is too painful to continue. I think we forgive other people. Like this, we've talked about this before in these spaces of like forgiving. What's the function of forgiving other people? Usually it's a gift you give yourself, because the alternative is just that you're sitting with that pain, you're sitting with that hurt. And I think the same is true for the self, that like, how far can you expect yourself to go without forgiveness and without some degree of compassion? Probably not very far. You can go only so far. Like it's like speaking with the carrot and the stick, it's like you can only go so far with the stick. You do need some degree of compassion and some degree of softness. At the same time, totally agree. Is that like, does that mean then we write a permission slip to like do all the things all the time and like mess up our behavior and whatever? It's like, no, not at all. It's I think it's threading the needle between continuing to hold ourselves to the highest possible standard, even when sometimes we don't meet that standard. It's like pressing refresh on that standard on a day-to-day basis. And that's why I'm a big, like, every time we have these spaces, I'm always talking about daily rituals, daily routines, because I think it's really important to remind ourselves on a daily basis of what it is that what we care about, what matters to us, why it is that we're doing the things that we're doing. Because otherwise, and this is not like a failing of mine or yours or any particular person, I think it's human nature. It's like, otherwise we just get into autopilot mode. So yeah, those are some thoughts.
Oh my God. So incredibly profound. I'm going to borrow your word, Hala, because I can't think of anything else right now. But I am so appreciative of both of your knowledge, your wisdom, your gems, and your time. It's honestly, it's such a privilege that we have you both here. You sharing your expertise with us. Whenever I get off the calls, I always have like a group chat with my friends. We're always like reflecting on things. Even now, there's a group chat going on, quoting both of you. So just know that we so appreciate you both being here. And I would like to pass the mic to Imam Khalid Latif, who is going to share a couple words and lead us in a dua before iftar, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I hope everyone's doing well, and I want to thank Sheikh Faiyaz and Hala for amazing conversation. I got to catch the last half hour of it, and I'm considering listening to this podcast now also. That seemingly is the most amazing thing, mashallah. Um, I wanted to thank you all for joining tonight and to just give you a little bit of detail on a campaign that we're running this Ramadan for Pillars of Peace. Alhamdulillah, we've seen a lot of growth in the organization since Naba and Kareem, who are two co-founders that came to my office with the idea of starting this as an organization a few years ago. We've started to lay some more deliberate plans around renovation of the shelter that we purchased or the building that we purchased to be an emergency confidential shelter last October, alhamdulillah. And with the delays from COVID and the pandemic, things are now moving forward at a more quick pace. And it seems like that we'll be able to get things going there and providing some residencies for those who are in need sooner than later, inshallah. We're doing programs like this quite regularly that literally hundreds, if not more, have joined in on and benefited from people like Hala, from Sheikh Faiyaz, and from others who have given us deep insight into what healthy relationships look like, what we should be seeing as red flags, and how we can be supportive. And we're now launching series and laying the groundwork for how do we preemptively start to help people who are struggling in need. How do we give people skills so that they can invest and avoid financial forms of abuse and not be fully reliant upon somebody who might be holding a bank account or credit card over their head as a way to shackle them further into abusive situations? Sheikh Faiyaz and Sheikh Suhaib and members of our staff are working on delineating processes so that women who come to see us who are stuck in religious marriages and don't know how to get out of them from an abusive husband not giving a divorce will now have more of an ease in that. And the unfortunate statistic of literally still tons of people reaching out on a weekly basis who find themselves in abusive situations that we're able to provide mediation for, advocacy for, counseling for. And it seems like the need for this work is just growing day in and day out. I remember on the first day of Ramadan, an elder woman was on the phone with me who was calling me now from a home that was the third space she had lived in after leaving from her abusive husband. And she said, for years, I was verbally abused by him, physically abused by him, that he would mistreat me to such an extent that he would say, I'm not going to stop and you should come home, but nothing is going to change. He said family was not really supportive and she didn't know where to go or what to do. She said, I know that this is not something that I should go back to, but how is somebody like me supposed to survive? I don't speak the language that everyone else here speaks so fluently. I have never had a job of my own and I don't know how to do many things. And that's where Pillars comes in as a support, as a connector, as a provider, so that no one has to choose to go back to their abuser. And no one has to choose to stay with their abuser. And so we're asking you all to help us continue to do this work. And where you can make a contribution that's tax deductible and zakah eligible, where aside from this woman in the last week and a half of Ramadan that all of our hearts have experienced, every day someone has reached out, if not more than one person, who is dealing with physical violence, forced marriage, various forms of abuse of all kinds. And it's for us to step up and say, well, what can we do to provide them the holistic services that they're in need of? If you go to launchgood.com/end domestic violence, you'll see our campaign, which we've pushed a little bit further. And alhamdulillah, is at about $20,000 right now. And our hope is to really raise as much as we can so that we can continue to support with as best of a set of services as possible women and children who find themselves in this place of abuse. And where you can give, even if it's $1, $5, $10, $1,000, $10,000, The LaunchGood platform doesn't utilize any platform fees anymore, but if you would prefer to donate by check or a different form of contribution, feel free to be in touch with us at info@pillarsofpeace.org, and we'll definitely figure out a way. You can get corporate gift matching through Benevity. You can donate through a donor advised fund. There's so many different things that we can do to just help people who are really struggling. And over the course of the pandemic, statistically, the numbers have gone up like crazy because people are literally stuck at home with their abusers. May Allah make things easy for all of them. What I'd like for you to do, aside from contributing today and contributing throughout the month and being an ongoing supporter, is to help us to spread the link, both of the campaign, but as well as of the service, so that people know that we're here as a resource for them. And that's really the most important thing. And I say this to the community that we're all blessed to be a part of and serve at the Islamic Center at New York University, that if we have to make choices on how we do things at our center versus supporting people in need, then we're going to always want to support people in need. If the choice has to be that we're going to get someone out of a home that is anything other than a home and provide them with a place of safety and comfort and security, and you and I, when this pandemic is over, are just going to sit on the ground and eat off of paper plates during Ramadan going forward, then that's what we're going to do. But there are a lot of people who need us right now to recognize our own capacity to be there for them. So whatever you can do to help us in this effort, it really is a communal responsibility. And I'm grateful for people like Naba, for Hala, for Sheikh Faiyaz, for Kareem, for so many who have volunteered and put in the time to help us understand better what this is and how it is that we can be a part of the solution. So again, launchgood.com/end domestic violence. You can go to pillarsofpeace.org/donate. And wherever you can be helpful in this effort, inshallah ta'ala, may Allah reward you immensely for it and make you a continued means of strength for His creation. And so with that, I'm going to ask you to join me in just a short dua as Maghrib approaches us, at least here in New York City. If you want to recenter yourself to the space, not just physically present, but in every sense of the word, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, understand that you are praying to a God who is not just hearing and listening, but accepting every word. And that your heart is the most crucial heart for the pinnacle of our prayer to be reached and actualized. That before anything came into existence, Allah wrote that we would share this moment together. And so it's our privilege to be able to pray. And so really pray from in here. And inshallah ta'ala, Allah Azza wa Jal will accept the dua that we are making towards Him and grant us even better than that. Allahumma ameen. اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لوجهك وعظيم سلطانك لك الحمد حمدا طاهرا طيبا مباركا فيه ليوم الدين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وفي الآخرين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. We begin this supplication in your name, Ya Allah, and beseech you to send your choicest salutations upon your most beloved sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. We ask that you shower your infinite mercy upon this gathering, granting each and every one who is present herein and our loved ones only the best in this world and the best in the next. We ask, Ya Allah, that if all of us are meant to be together only at this time, at this place, whether we are young or old, male or female, regardless of our race, our ethnicity, our social class, our country of origin, our cultural heritage, whether we are Muslim or come from a different walk of life, Ya Rabbi, if our individual hearts are meant to be in the presence of all other hearts that are gathered here only at this time, at this place, then gather us all together again in the best of places in the world beyond this one. Ya Allah, Ya Alim, knower of all things, you who has known each of us before we even knew ourselves. Help us through this month of Ramadan to know ourselves better. Help us through this blessed month to know our strengths and to live by them, to know our character and how to increase it, to know our pains and how to heal them, to know our value and how to share it, to know our blessings and how to be grateful for them, to know our wants and to see where they conflict with our needs, to know our shortcomings and how to confront and defeat them, to know how to really forgive all those who have wronged us and to actually forgive them, to know how to seek forgiveness from those that we have wronged and to then go out and seek it, to know what charity is by being generous with our wealth and our time, to know what integrity is by being honest and truthful, and to know what real goodness is by extending our hands without qualification to all those who are in need. Help us through this blessed month to know who it is that we are and not let the people we are today be afraid any longer to meet the people we can be tomorrow. And through it, Ya Rabbi, help us to know you and your mercy, to know you and your love. Make us from amongst those who live with true contentment every day of our lives, and grant us an abode in the place of ultimate contentment in the world beyond this one. Allow for our beings to be filled with self-love that we can go out and share with others, rather than a love of ourselves that keeps us from being everything that we are able to be. When our hearts are heavy and we are filled with darkness, bring people to us who illuminate us through kindness, compassion, and love. Make us always the reason that people have hope in this world, and never the reason that people might dread it. Help us to know the realities of those that are around us by overcoming whatever it is that exists within us that keeps us away from one another. Through this month of Ramadan, perfect us inwardly so that we are victorious in the battle that is taking place every day for control of our hearts. Give us victory over selfishness and remove from within us any feeling of arrogance or racism. Increase us in brotherhood and sisterhood so that we might together take on every challenge that we face and together celebrate every success and achievement. Give us hearts that feel anger whenever one of our sisters are abused, and the confidence and compassion needed to build for her the services and shelter she is in need of. Give us hearts that feel sadness when any one of us loses a loved one, and the gentleness and mercy needed to be there for them fully. Give us hearts that feel joy whenever any one of us succeeds, and the love and hope needed to celebrate that achievement. Give us hearts that are not lost in the pursuit of this world, but hearts that are bold enough to be drawn to the world beyond this one. Let our rage be only at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that we will work for justice, equality, and peace. Let our tears shed only for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and conflict, so that we will reach out our hands to comfort them and change their pain into joy. Let our successes be many, as we make a difference in this world by doing the things which others say cannot be done. Help us to see this world always through hearts that have benefited from Ramadan, to see the goodness in all those who are around us, and to never be those who elevate ourselves by denigrating others, to see the benefit in any challenge that comes our way, and to not pass on a gift that can only be acquired through patience and perseverance. Make us those who find real peace and real love, and not just the semblance of it, those who give real peace and real love, and not just the facade of it. For any pain and torment that we might have faced, through it give us ease, understanding, and facility. For any suffering that we have sustained, bring to us understanding and strength of healing. Grant us always a life that is filled with a wellness of our minds, our bodies, our spirits, and our hearts. Make this month of Ramadan a month of rejuvenation for us, a month of renewal, a month of replenishment. For it is not our stomachs that are hungry, nor our throats that are thirsty, but our hearts are parched and long to be revitalized. Grant us both in and through the coming weeks a much needed peace that we long for, even if we don't realize it. And throughout this month and the days beyond, help us to make decisions through our hearts and never at their expense. Put into our hearts a desire for nothing less but to take from this Ramadan all that it is that we can and remove from our hearts anything that distracts us from it. Make us those who seek out, witness, and benefit from Laylatul Qadr. And in our standings in the night, help us to remember all those who are forgotten, whether by us alone or the world around us. Give us the energy to stand into the night and the sincerity to make dua for all those who are special to us. Ya Allah, bless us in this month of Ramadan and help us to gain from it. Increase the Pillars of Peace team and make us a continued means of benefit for your creation. For all those, Ya Rabbi, who find themselves in a state of distress and pain, in places of abuse, who are struggling right now to know which way to go, make us a means through which they find healing. Make us a means through which they find support. Make us a means through which the abuse stops, Ya Rab. And give us the strength to continue, even when it's exhausting, even when it's tiring, even when it's hard and difficult. Help us to remember, Ya Allah, that there are people who are looking to us to be our very best. Increase the love that we have for them so that we meet all of these challenges with courage, with defiance, knowing that there is something better in the end in store. Protect us always from hearts that are not humble, tongues that are not wise, and eyes that have forgotten how to cry. Forgive us for our shortcomings and guide and bless us all. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you all so much. Please again do donate to the Launch Good if you can, launchgood.com/end domestic violence. You can visit pillarsofpeace.org/donate. But in these days, please give what you can, both of your wealth, your resources, as well as the du'as that you are privileged and blessed to make, that those mothers, those children, those people who are looking to us to remember them, how you can keep them in the most special part of you, your hearts, in these blessed nights. Inshallah ta'ala, it'll go a long way in alleviating for them the pain and suffering that they find themselves in. Wallahu ta'ala alam wa billahi tawfiq. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. I'm going to pass it back to Naba, inshallah, just to close us out.
Thank you, Imam Khalid, for that beautiful dua. I'm really missing being in the IC space right now. And I close my eyes. I could try to transport myself over there a little bit. But yeah, please feel free to reach out, info@pillarsofpeace.org. If you or someone you know, a loved one, could benefit from resources, we'd be happy to be a resource, inshallah. Thank you again for joining us today, and keep us in your duas. You will all be in ours. Thank you again, Sheikh Faiyaz, Dr. Hala, and Imam Khalid, and everyone for being here today. Assalamu alaikum.